I was a waitress, just a girl with a dream and a jar full of tips hidden in my closet. Then she walked in, the sister of a mafia boss. She looked at me like I was nothing, like I was invisible. She humiliated me in front of everyone. She took my money, my dignity, my hope, and threw it all away like trash. She thought that was the end of it. She thought I would just disappear back into my little life. She was wrong. What happened next, no one saw coming. Not her, not her brother, not even me. My name is Sophia, and I am going to tell you a story. It is a story about a night that changed everything for me. It is a story about power and cruelty and the quiet, desperate hope for something better. But most of all, it is a story about a woman who thought she had lost everything, only to discover that losing everything was just the beginning. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, a place called Oakhaven. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and the biggest news was when the local diner changed its pancake recipe. My world was small and safe. My father worked at the auto plant until his back gave out, and my mother cleaned houses for the richer families on the other side of town. We weren't poor, not in the way some people are poor. We had a roof over our heads and food on the table, but there was never any extra. My clothes were always hand-me-downs from my cousin, and a trip to the movies was a birthday treat. I worked at the Oakhaven Diner from the moment I was 16. It was a classic American diner, with a long counter lined with red vinyl stools, a jukebox that only played oldies, and the smell of coffee and bacon permanently in the air. My boss, a gruff but kind man named Pete, gave me the job. He said he liked my smile, and I did smile. I smiled at the tired factory workers coming off the night shift, at the old farmers who would sit for hours over a single cup of coffee, at the high school kids on a date. I smiled because I was grateful. That job, those tips, they were my ticket. They were my way out. You see, I had a dream. It wasn't a big, flashy dream. I didn't want to be a movie star or a singer. I wanted to go to community college. I wanted to study to become a nurse. I wanted to help people, the way I wish someone could have helped my father with his pain. I had a jar in my closet, a big pickle jar, and every tip, every single dollar I could spare, went into that jar. For 3 years, I filled that jar. It was my hope, my future, my escape from the small, predictable life of Oakhaven. That was my life. A simple, honest, hopeful life. And then they came to town. They arrived in cars that cost more than our house. Black, shiny SUVs with tinted windows that glided through the streets of Oakhaven like sharks in a calm pond. They checked into the nicest hotel, the one with the pool that we kids used to sneak into. Word spread fast. It was a big deal. The Mancini family was in town. I didn't know much about them, only whispers I'd hear from the customers at the diner. They were from the city, from New York. They were powerful, they were rich, and they were dangerous. The whispers said the Mancinis were connected. They weren't just regular rich people, they were mafia. Their money came from things that weren't talked about in polite company. The men wore expensive suits and had cold, hard eyes. The women were beautiful, draped in jewels and designer clothes, but they carried themselves with a kind of arrogant grace, like they were better than everyone else. And everyone else in Oakhaven, for the most part, believed they were. They tiptoed around them, gave them the best tables, the best service. They were afraid, and they were also fascinated. The dullness of our town had been broken by something exciting, something dangerous. I remember the first time I saw one of them up close. It was a man, young and handsome, with eyes that looked right through you. He came into the diner alone, ordered black coffee and pie, and sat in the corner booth for 2 hours without saying a word to anyone. He left a $100 bill on a $5 check and walked out. Pete told me later that was Franco, one of Salvatore Mancini's top men. That was the kind of money they threw around. $100 for a cup of coffee and a slice of pie. To them, it was nothing. To me, it was 2 days of tips. I didn't think much of it at the time. Rich people came through town sometimes, usually on their way to somewhere else. Oakhaven was just a pit stop, a place to get gas and a cheap meal before continuing on to the cities or the lakes. But the Mancinis weren't passing through. They were staying. They bought the old Huntington place, the biggest house in town, a crumbling mansion that had been empty for decades. They renovated it in months, filling it with expensive furniture and art. They brought their own people with them, their own chefs and drivers and guards. They were building something in Oakhaven, and no one knew what it was. The diner became a gathering place for their men. Not the top guys, but the soldiers, the drivers, the ones who ran errands. They would come in for breakfast before the sun came up, for lunch in the middle of the day, for late-night coffee after whatever business they were conducting. They were always polite to me in a distant way. They would leave generous tips and never cause trouble. But there was something in their eyes, a coldness that made me uneasy. They were like wolves trying to act like dogs. Pete was nervous. He didn't want trouble. He told me and the other waitress, a girl named Maggie, to just be nice, take their orders, don't ask questions, don't stare. We did as he asked. We were all a little afraid, but we were also curious. Who were these people? What were they doing in our town? The answer, we would eventually learn, was that they were hiding. There was trouble back in New York, trouble with other families, trouble with the federal government. Salvatore Mancini had decided to relocate his operation temporarily, to wait out the storm in a place where no one would think to look for him. Oakhaven, Ohio, was that place. A tiny dot on the map, hours from anywhere important. It was perfect. And so they settled in. They bought businesses. They made friends with the local politicians, the police chief, the judge. They spread money around like fertilizer, and soon enough, things started growing. The town woke up. New restaurants opened. Shops that had been empty for years were suddenly bustling with customers. People had jobs again. The Mancini money was good for Oakhaven, and most people were willing to look the other way when it came to where that money came from. But not everyone was fooled. There were whispers, always whispers, about the warehouse on the edge of town that was suddenly busy at all hours of the night. About the trucks that came and went under cover of darkness. About the men who disappeared and were never seen again. The Mancinis brought prosperity, but they also brought fear. And fear, I was learning, was the most powerful weapon of all. It was against this backdrop that I first encountered Vittoria Mancini. She was different from the other Mancini women I had seen. They were quiet, submissive, content to be ornaments on the arms of their men. But Vittoria was something else entirely. She was a force of nature, a hurricane in designer clothes. She walked into a room and everyone turned to look at her, not just because she was beautiful, but because she demanded attention. She had a presence, a gravity that pulled everything toward her. I had seen her around town before that night in the diner. She would drive through the main street in a convertible, her hair flying in the wind, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She would shop in the little boutiques, buying things she didn't need, just because she could. She would eat at the fancy restaurant that had opened specifically to cater to the Mancini crowd, always with an entourage, always the center of attention. She was a princess, and everyone in Oakhaven knew it, but I had never spoken to her. I had never been close enough to feel the full force of her contempt. That would come later. The first time she came to the diner, that Tuesday night with her two friends, I thought it was just a whim. A rich girl slumming it, curious about how the other half lived. I didn't realize that she had noticed me, that she had seen something in my face, my quiet dignity, my hopeful dream, that she wanted to crush. Bullies have a sixth sense for that kind of thing. They can smell hope the way a shark smells blood. That night, after she left, after I cleaned up their 3 glasses of water and watched them drive away in their expensive car, I stood in the parking lot and cried. Not because of what she had said, though that hurt, but because of what it meant. It meant that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I saved, there would always be people like her who could destroy me with a few words. My dream, my beautiful fragile dream, suddenly seemed so small, so pathetic. What was community college compared to her world of diamonds and private planes? What was nursing compared to the power she wielded with a flick of her wrist? I went home that night and sat on my bed, staring at my pickle jar. It was almost full. 3 years of tips, 3 years of smiling at rude customers, 3 years of standing on my feet until my back ached. For what? So that one day I could wipe the bottoms of old people and empty bedpans. So that I could trade one form of servitude for another. The darkness crept in that night. The doubt, the despair. For the first time in my life, I wondered if it was all worth it. If I should just give up, settle down, marry some local boy, have kids, and live the life my mother had lived. It wasn't a bad life. It was honest. It was safe. But it wasn't mine. It wasn't the life I had dreamed of. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of that encounter. Her voice, her eyes, her cruel smile, the way her friends had giggled, the way the other customers had looked away, embarrassed for me but too afraid to speak up. I had never felt so alone, so small, so invisible. But somewhere in the darkness, a spark remained. A tiny ember of anger that refused to be extinguished. It wasn't much, just a flicker. But it was enough. It was enough to get me out of bed the next morning. Enough to make me put on my uniform and go to work. Enough to make me smile at the next customer, even though my heart wasn't in it. The days that followed were a blur. I went through the motions, but inside I was changing. The anger was growing, feeding on itself, becoming something darker and more determined. I started paying attention to the Mancini men when they came into the diner. I listened to their conversations, their jokes, their complaints. I learned their names, their habits, their weaknesses. I became a student of their world, and I was a fast learner. There was one man, a young soldier named Tony, who came in every morning at 6 for coffee and a donut. He was always alone, always quiet. He had a girlfriend back in New York, I learned, a girl named Maria. He would call her every night at the same time, standing outside the diner where the reception was better. I could see him through the window, his face soft and vulnerable, so different from the cold mask he wore during the day. He was in love, and love was a weakness. I filed that information away. There was another man, an older guy named Vinny, who liked to talk. He would sit at the counter for hours, nursing a cup of coffee, telling anyone who would listen about the old days, about the wars, about the bosses he had known. He was lonely, I could tell. The younger men didn't respect him, didn't want to hear his stories. But I listened. I always listened. And Vinny, grateful for an audience, told me things he shouldn't have, about the warehouse, about the shipments, about the accountant who was coming from New York to straighten out the books. That was how I first heard about Arthur, the accountant. Vinny mentioned him one morning, complaining about how the boss was bringing in an outsider to check their work, as if they couldn't be trusted. An accountant, Vinny said, spitting the word out like it was poison. What do we need an accountant for? We've been doing business fine for years without some pencil pusher coming in and telling us how to run things. I didn't say anything. I just refilled his coffee and smiled. But inside, my mind was racing. An accountant, someone who knew the numbers, someone who might have access to the kind of information that could bring them down. I started watching for him, for Arthur. I didn't know what he looked like, but I knew he would come. And when he did, I would be ready. He came on a Thursday night. I knew it was him the moment he walked in. He was different from the other Mancini men. Older, softer, with nervous eyes that darted around the room. He wore a cheap suit that didn't fit quite right, and his hands shook when he picked up the menu. He sat in the corner booth, the same one Franco had sat in months ago, and ordered coffee. Just coffee. I watched him for an hour. He didn't look at his phone, he didn't read a book. He just sat there, staring into his cup, his face pale and drawn. He was waiting for something or someone, but no one came. Finally, I approached him. "Can I get you a refill?" I asked. He jumped, startled. "What? Oh, yes, thank you." I poured the coffee. "You look like you're waiting for someone," I said, my voice casual. He shook his head. "No, no one, just." Thinking, I nodded and walked away, but I kept watching him. He stayed until we closed, then left a $5 bill on a $2 check and disappeared into the night. He came back the next night, and the next. Always the same booth, always the same coffee, always the same haunted look in his eyes. On the third night, I sat down across from him. It was bold, risky, but something told me he needed a friend. "You're the accountant," I said. It wasn't a question. His eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "I hear things," I said. "I'm the waitress. People talk in front of me like I'm not there." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Yeah, that's how it works, isn't it? The invisible people, the ones who serve the coffee and clean the tables. No one ever thinks you're listening." "I'm always listening," I said. He looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time. "Why?" I didn't have an answer for that. Not one I could put into words, so I just shrugged. "Because I want to understand." We talked for an hour that night. He told me his name was Arthur. He told me he had been working for the Mancinis for 15 years, ever since they caught him cooking the books at a legitimate business and offered him a choice. Work for them or go to prison. He chose to work for them. He had been a prisoner ever since. "I'm not a bad man," he said, his voice cracking. "I just made a bad choice, and now I can't get out. They own me. Body and soul." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just listened. He told me about his wife, a woman named Alina, who thought he was a successful financial consultant. He told me about his daughter, who was in college, studying to be a teacher. He told me about the house in New Jersey, the mortgage, the car payments, all the things that kept him trapped. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "A tiny mistake. A few $1,000s that didn't add up. It was an honest error, but they don't believe in honest errors. They think I'm stealing from them. They think I'm working with someone else. They're going to kill me, I know it." My heart ached for him. He was just a man, a frightened, ordinary man, caught up in something much bigger than himself. He was me, in a way, just another person trying to survive. "Maybe there's a way out," I said. He looked at me, hope flickering in his tired eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe you have something they want, something that could buy your freedom." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. "I have everything, years of records, bank accounts, names, dates, everything. I've been saving it for years in case I ever needed leverage. It's in a safe place. But if they find out—" "They won't find out," I said. "Not if you're careful." He shook his head. "It's too late for me. They're watching me. Every move I make, I'm a dead man walking. But you—" He looked at me, really looked at me. "You're invisible, you could do it." "Do what?" "Take it, use it, I don't know, do something with it. Make them pay for what they've done, for what they're going to do to me." I should have said no, I should have walked away, but I didn't. The anger, that burning anger that had been growing inside me since the night Vittoria humiliated me, made the decision for me. "Tell me where it is," I said. He told me everything. The bank, the name, the number, the key. He gave me his life, his hope, his revenge, and placed it in my hands. The next night, Arthur didn't come to the diner. The night after that, I heard the news. His body had been found in a ditch on the side of the highway. Robbery, the police said, but I knew the truth. Arthur was gone, and now it was up to me. I won't lie to you. The days after Arthur's death were the hardest of my life. I was terrified. Every knock on the door, every car that drove slowly past my apartment, every glance from a stranger sent my heart racing. I had the key to a safety deposit box filled with the secrets of a mafia family. If they ever found out, I would end up like Arthur. Worse, probably. I had seen enough movies to know what happened to people who crossed the mafia, but I also had something else. I had purpose. For the first time in my life, I had a mission. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, though that was part of it. It was about justice. It was about Arthur and all the other Arthurs out there, trapped and terrified with no way out. It was about proving that the little people, the invisible people, mattered, that we could fight back. I waited a week before I made my move. A week of watching, waiting, planning. I learned the bus schedule to the next town. I figured out the best time to go, when the bank would be least busy. I practiced what I would say, how I would act. I became an actress, playing the role of an ordinary girl running an ordinary errand. The day finally came. I called in sick to work, something I had never done before. Pete was understanding, as always. He told me to rest, to take care of myself. If only he knew, the bus ride was endless. 45 minutes of watching the flat Ohio landscape roll by, my heart pounding in my chest. I kept expecting the bus to be pulled over, for men in suits to storm aboard and drag me away. But nothing happened. The bus arrived at the station. I got off. I walked to the bank. It was a small town bank, the kind with friendly tellers and plastic plants and calendars featuring pictures of local farms. I went to the counter and asked for the safety deposit box. I gave them the name and the number. I showed them the key. A young woman with a kind smile led me to a small room in the back, handed me the box, and closed the door. I sat there for a moment, staring at the metal box in my hands. This was it. Arthur's legacy, his insurance policy, his revenge. I opened it. Inside, there were several thick folders, USB drives, and old-fashioned ledger books. I didn't look at them there. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly. I put everything into my bag, closed the box, and walked out of the bank as calmly as I could. The bus ride home was even worse. I felt like everyone was staring at me, like the bag on my lap was glowing with radioactive secrets. I clutched it to my chest and stared out the window, counting the miles until I was safe. Back in my apartment, I locked the door, closed the blinds, and spread everything out on my bed. It was overwhelming. Pages and pages of numbers, names, companies, dates. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, in Switzerland, in Panama. Real estate holdings under false names. Shell companies that existed only on paper. It was a web of deceit so complex, so intricate, that it took my breath away. I didn't understand half of it, but I understood enough. I could see the patterns. Money flowing from illegal operations into legitimate businesses. Profits hidden, taxes evaded, laws broken. It was all there in black and white. The Mancini empire laid bare. For days, I studied those documents. I made copies. I organized them. I created my own filing system, my own evidence locker. I became an expert on the Mancini family's finances, on their secrets, their weaknesses. And the more I learned, the more I realized how powerful I had become. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. I needed a plan. I needed to use this information in a way that would hurt them, really hurt them. And not just any of them. I wanted Vittoria. I wanted her to pay for what she had done to me, for what she had said, for the way she had made me feel. I wanted her to know that the invisible girl had seen her, had judged her, and had found her wanting. The plan came to me slowly, piece by piece. It was risky, dangerous, maybe even stupid. But it was also beautiful in its simplicity. I would confront her. I would show her the evidence. I would let her know that I had the power to destroy her family. And then I would do it anyway. It was about more than revenge. It was about making her see me, really see me. Not as a waitress, not as nothing, but as a person, as someone who mattered. I started watching her, following her, learning her routine. It wasn't hard. She was a creature of habit, predictable in her arrogance. Every morning, she went to the fancy coffee shop for a latte and a croissant. Every afternoon, she went to the spa or the boutique. Every evening, she held court at the hotel bar, surrounded by admirers and sycophants. I watched her and I learned her. I saw her vanity, her cruelty, her complete lack of empathy. I saw how she treated the staff at the hotel, the way she snapped her fingers at the bellhops, the contempt in her voice when she spoke to the housekeepers. She was a bully, pure and simple. And bullies, I had learned, were all the same. They only had power because people gave it to them. The perfect moment came a week later. I saw her through the window of the boutique, trying on an emerald green gown. She was alone for once without her entourage. The shop owner, a nervous woman named Mrs. Patterson, was fawning over her, bringing her different shoes, different jewelry, different everything. Vittoria accepted this attention as her due, never once thanking the woman, never once acknowledging her as a fellow human being. I waited across the street in the coffee shop, watching, planning. When she finally emerged, carrying a large shopping bag, I made my move. I walked up to her just as she was about to get into her car. "Vittoria Mancini," I said. She turned, annoyance flickering across her perfect face. When she saw it was me, the waitress, the annoyance turned to disdain. "You," she said. "What do you want? Did you follow me? That's pathetic. If you're looking for a tip, you've got the wrong idea." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not looking for a tip. I'm looking for you. I have something that belongs to your family." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I pulled a single sheet of paper from my pocket. It was a copy of one of the ledger pages from Arthur's files, showing a large transfer of money to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. "Recognize this?" I asked. She glanced at it, and for just a moment I saw fear in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. "Where did you get that?" she hissed. "From a dead man," I said. "Your family's accountant. The one you had killed." She took a step towards me. The driver got out of the car, but she waved him back. She wanted to handle this herself. "You're playing a very dangerous game, little waitress," she said. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. Give me that paper." "No," I said, and I smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "I don't think I will. You see, this is just a copy. I have a lot more where this came from. Years of records, bank accounts, names, everything your family has tried to hide." Her face went pale. For the first time, she looked uncertain, scared. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "Money." "How much?" "I don't want your money," I said. "I want you to remember me. I'm the waitress from the Oakhaven Diner. The one you called nothing. The one you said was invisible." I want you to know that the nothing, the invisible girl, is the one who is going to destroy your family. You're insane, she breathed. My brother will find you. He will kill you. Maybe, I said. But before he does, this information will be in the hands of the FBI. I've already made copies. I've already sent one to a journalist in New York. If anything happens to me, if I don't check in, the rest go out. Your family's empire, Vittoria, is built on paper, and I'm holding the match. I turned and walked away. I could feel her eyes on my back, burning with hatred and fear. I didn't look back. I walked to the end of the block, turned the corner, and then I leaned against a wall, my whole body shaking. I had done it. I had faced the monster, and I hadn't blinked. The days that followed were the longest of my life. I waited for the knock on the door, the black SUV, the men in suits. I barely slept. I jumped at every sound, but nothing happened. The town was quiet. Then, 1 week later, the news broke. Federal agents had raided the warehouse, the hotel, the Mancini mansion. Several men were arrested, and Vittoria Mancini, the princess of the Mafia, was led out of the hotel in handcuffs. I watched it on television, my heart pounding. Her perfect hair was a mess. Her face, stripped of its usual arrogance, looked pale and shocked. Her beautiful clothes were replaced by a drab prison jumpsuit. And for just a moment, as she was being pushed into the police car, she looked directly at the camera. And I swear, in that moment, she knew. She knew it was me. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt happy. And in a way, I did. The bully had been punished. But as I watched her being driven away, I didn't feel the surge of pure joy I had expected. I felt something else. A strange, hollow sadness. Revenge, I was learning, was a complicated dish. It was satisfying, yes, but it also left a bitter taste. The town of Oakhaven went crazy. The Mancini name was on every lip. Everyone had a theory. Everyone knew someone who knew something, but no one knew the truth. No one knew about the quiet waitress from the diner. I kept my head down. I went back to work. My smile was back, but it was different now. Quieter. More knowing. A few weeks later, I was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up, and my heart stopped. A man walked in. He was tall, dressed in an immaculate dark suit. His face was handsome, but hard, with cold, dark eyes that seemed to see right through you. He wasn't one of the men who had been arrested. This was a different kind of man. This was Salvatore Mancini, the boss, Vittoria's brother. He walked slowly to the counter and sat down on one of the red vinyl stools. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me. It was the same kind of look his sister had given me, the one that made you feel like a specimen, but his was infinitely more frightening. There was a stillness in him, a coiled power that was terrifying. I stood frozen, a dish rag in my hand. "Coffee," he said. His voice was soft, but it carried a weight that filled the entire diner. I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. I turned and poured him a cup of coffee with shaking hands. I placed it in front of him. He took a sip, then placed the cup back on the saucer. He looked around the empty diner. "Nice place," he said. "Quiet." I just nodded again. He looked back at me. "My sister," he said. "She's in a lot of trouble, federal trouble, the kind of trouble that doesn't go away." I said nothing. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "She was arrogant," he continued, his voice still soft. "She was cruel. I told her many times that her attitude would be her downfall. She never listened. She thought she was untouchable." He took another sip of coffee. "She was wrong." He was quiet for a long moment, just staring into his coffee. I didn't dare move. "The information that put her away," he said, finally looking up at me. "It came from here, from this town. From someone who knew things they shouldn't have known." My blood ran cold. This was it. This was the moment. He reached into his jacket. I flinched, expecting a gun. But instead, he pulled out a thick, white envelope and placed it on the counter. "My sister made a mistake," he said. "She thought she was better than other people. She thought she could treat them like dirt and there would be no consequences. She was wrong." He pushed the envelope towards me. "This is for you." I stared at the envelope, then back at him. "I don't understand," I whispered. He gave a small, humorless smile. "You don't have to understand, you just have to take it. Consider it a thank you for teaching my sister a valuable lesson. A lesson I should have taught her myself a long time ago." He stood up, placed a $5 bill on the counter for the coffee, and walked towards the door. He paused with his hand on the handle and looked back at me. "You're not nothing," he said. "Remember that." And then he was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the envelope. Finally, with trembling hands, I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a stack of $100 bills. I didn't count them, but I could tell it was a lot. Thousands of dollars, more money than I had ever seen. I didn't know what to feel. Confusion, relief, a strange, unsettling sense of validation. The brother of the woman I had helped destroy had just thanked me and given me money. It was surreal. It was frightening. It was also, in a bizarre way, a kind of justice. The money from Salvatore Mancini sat in my closet for a long time, next to my pickle jar. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. It felt dirty, tainted by its source. But eventually, I made a decision. I took that money, along with the money from my jar, and I enrolled in community college. I became a nurse. Now, I work in the pediatric ward of a hospital in Columbus. It's a good job, an honest job. I hold the hands of scared parents and I comfort their sick children. I help people the way I always wanted to. It is hard work, exhausting work, but it is meaningful. It is mine. I think about Vittoria Mancini sometimes. I heard she got a long prison sentence. 20 years for conspiracy and money laundering. I wonder if she thinks about me, the nothing waitress from Ohio. I wonder if she lies in her cell at night and thinks about the moment her world collapsed, and if she ever connects it to that night in the diner. I hope she does. I hope she remembers my face. I think about Arthur, too. The frightened accountant who gave me his life's work and asked for nothing in return. I hope he knows, wherever he is, that his sacrifice meant something. That his information brought down the people who killed him. That justice, in the end, was served. As for me, I don't feel like a hero. I don't feel triumphant. I feel like a woman who was pushed too far and who pushed back. I learned that revenge is a powerful weapon, but it's also a heavy burden. It changes you. It showed me a darkness in myself I didn't know existed, but it also showed me my own strength. It showed me that I am not invisible. I am not nothing. My name is Sophia. I was a waitress, and this was my story. A story of humiliation, of anger, and of a revenge that was as sweet as it was bitter. The chapter of my life with the Mancinis is closed, but the woman who emerged from it, the woman standing here today, is stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to live a life of meaning. A life that proves that your worth is not determined by your bank account or your last name, but by the content of your character and the strength of your spirit. And that, I have learned, is the most powerful revenge of all. Sometimes, late at night, when the hospital is quiet and the patients are sleeping, I think about that night in the diner. The way Vittoria looked at me, the things she said. And I wonder what my life would be like if she had never walked through that door. Would I still be in Oakhaven, still waiting tables, still dreaming of something more? Or would I have found another way, another path? I'll never know, and in a way it doesn't matter. What matters is that I am here now, living the life I chose. A life that is mine, completely and fully mine. No one gave it to me, I earned it. Every dollar, every hour, every sacrifice. The pickle jar is gone now. I donated it to a charity that helps young women go to college. It seemed fitting, somehow. A symbol of hope passed on to someone else. And the money from Salvatore Mancini. I used it to pay for my education, but I also set some aside. I started a small scholarship fund for kids from Oakhaven who want to go to college but can't afford it. I call it the Arthur Fund, though no one knows why. It's my secret, my way of honoring the man who made it all possible. Life is strange, isn't it? You think you know where you're going, what your story will be. And then something happens, something small and cruel, and everything changes. You can let it break you, or you can let it make you. I chose to let it make me. Vittoria Mancini thought she was teaching me a lesson that night in the diner. She thought she was putting me in my place, showing me that I was nothing. But she was wrong. She taught me something else entirely. She taught me that I had power I never knew existed. She taught me that the invisible people, the ones who serve the coffee and clean the tables, are the ones who see everything, hear everything, know everything. And that knowledge, that awareness, is a kind of power that money can't buy. So here I am. Sophia, the waitress. Sophia, the nurse. Sophia, the woman who brought down a Mafia princess. It sounds like a movie, doesn't it? Like something that couldn't possibly happen in real life. But it did happen. It happened to me. And if it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. That's the thing about power. It's not fixed. It's not permanent. It flows and shifts and changes hands in ways you never expect. One day you're on top of the world, and the next day you're in a prison cell, wondering how it all went wrong. I don't gloat about what happened to Vittoria. I don't celebrate her suffering. That would make me no better than her. But I don't regret it either. She made her choices, and she paid for them, just like I made my choices, and I'm living with them. The difference is my choices led me here, to a life of purpose and meaning, to a job where I make a difference every single day, to a future that is bright and full of possibility. Vittoria's choices led her to a prison cell, and maybe, just maybe, in that cell, she has time to think, to reflect on the person she was, the things she did, the people she hurt. Maybe she'll come out a different person, a better person. Or maybe she won't. It's not my concern anymore. My concern is the children in this hospital, the ones with cancer, with heart defects, with injuries that should never happen to anyone, let alone a child. They are my focus now. They are my purpose. They are the reason I get up every morning and put on my scrubs and go to work. And when I hold their hands, when I comfort their parents, when I do my small part to ease their suffering, I think about that night in the diner. And I realize that everything, even the cruelty, even the humiliation, led me here. Led me to this moment, this work, this life. So no, I don't regret it. I don't regret any of it. The anger, the fear, the revenge, it was all part of the journey. It was all part of becoming who I am. My name is Sophia. And this is my story. But the story doesn't end there, does it? Life goes on. Time moves forward. And the choices we make echo into the future in ways we can never predict. A year after Vittoria's arrest, I received a letter. It was sent to my apartment in Columbus, forwarded from my old address in Oakhaven. The envelope was plain white, with no return address, but I knew who it was from before I even opened it. The letter was written on thin prison paper, the kind they give inmates in federal facilities. The handwriting was elegant, precise, exactly as I would have expected, and it was signed Vittoria Mancini. I sat on my couch for a long time, holding that letter. Part of me wanted to throw it away, unread. What could she possibly have to say to me? What words could she offer that would undo what she had done? But curiosity, that old weakness, got the better of me. I opened it. Sophia, it began. Not dear Sophia, just my name, like a command, like she was still the princess and I was still the servant. I don't know why I'm writing this. Perhaps because I have nothing but time, and time makes you think about things you would rather forget. Perhaps because my therapist says I need to confront my past. Perhaps because I am bored, and you are the only person in the world who might actually read this. I remember you. Of course I remember you. You were the waitress at that terrible diner. The one with the sad eyes and the hopeful smile. I saw you, even if I pretended not to. I saw your dream, your desperate little dream of something better, and I wanted to crush it. Why? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times since I've been in here. Why did I feel the need to hurt you? You never did anything to me. You were just there, serving water, being polite, trying to survive. And I hated you for it. I hated you because you had something I didn't. Hope. You believed that if you worked hard enough, saved enough, smiled enough, you could make a better life for yourself. I never had that. I was born into this life, this family, this prison of power and money and fear. I never had a choice. I never had a dream. So when I saw you, with your jar of tips and your community college application and your pathetic little uniform, I wanted to destroy you. I wanted to show you that hope was a lie, that the world doesn't work that way, that people like you don't get to win. I was wrong. You did win. You won completely. You took everything from me, and you did it without violence, without threats, without becoming like us. You used your mind, your courage, your anger. You proved that I was wrong about you, about everything. I don't expect your forgiveness. I wouldn't give it if I were you. But I want you to know that I see you now, really see you. Not as a waitress, not as nothing, but as a person. As someone who mattered. As someone who mattered more than I ever did. Maybe that's why I'm writing. To tell you that you were right, that I was wrong. That the invisible girl was the one who was truly seen. Vittoria. I read that letter 3 times. The first time, I cried. The second time, I laughed. The third time, I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer with other important things. I didn't know what to feel. Gratitude, satisfaction, pity, all of the above, none of the above. In the end, I decided not to respond. What was there to say? That I accepted her apology? I didn't. That I forgave her? I wasn't sure I could. That I wished her well? I didn't wish her ill, but I didn't wish her well either. I just wished her to be a part of my past, not my present or my future. So the letter sits in my drawer, unread now for years. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, a reminder of how far I've come. Of the person I was and the person I became. Of the power of hope and the danger of cruelty. I still work at the hospital. I'm a senior nurse now, in charge of the pediatric ward. I train new nurses, comfort frightened parents, hold the hands of dying children. It's hard, harder than anything I've ever done. But it's also the most meaningful work I can imagine. I think about Arthur sometimes, especially when I'm training a new nurse who reminds me of him. Nervous, uncertain, but with a good heart. I try to be kind to them, to encourage them, to let them know that they matter. It's my way of honoring his memory, of paying forward the gift he gave me. I think about Salvatore Mancini too. I heard he died a few years ago, killed in a dispute with another family. The old ways, the old violence finally caught up with him. I felt something when I heard the news. Not sadness exactly, not satisfaction either. Just a quiet acknowledgement that another chapter had closed. And Vittoria, I don't know what happened to her. I stopped following the news about the Mancinis long ago. She's probably still in prison, or maybe she got out. Maybe she's living a quiet life somewhere, under a different name, trying to forget who she used to be. I hope so. I hope she found some peace, some purpose, some hope of her own. As for me, I have everything I ever wanted. A career I love. A life of meaning. A future full of possibility. I never married, never had children of my own. But I have hundreds of children, thousands of them, the ones I've helped and held and healed over the years. They are my family, my legacy. And sometimes, when I'm sitting with a sick child in the middle of the night, holding their hand while they sleep, I think about that night in the diner. About Vittoria's cruel words, about the money scattered on the table, about the tears I cried in the parking lot. And I realize that without that night, without that cruelty, without that pain, I might never have found my way here. To this place, this work, this life. So no, I don't regret it. I don't regret any of it. The humiliation, the anger, the revenge, it was all part of the journey. It was all part of becoming who I am. My name is Sophia. I was a waitress. I am a nurse. I am a woman who fought back against a bully and won. And this is my story, the end, or maybe just the beginning.